Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Transformed You. We're going to dive into the world of relationships, and I'm sure you're going to find your journey and where you're at somewhere in this equation. We hear a lot from people asking questions, bringing statements, saying things like this. I feel alone in my journey. I'm having a hard time finding people to heart connect with. In my church, in my friendships, I'm struggling even in my marriage. I feel like I'm heading in a direction, and my spouse is someone that I can't heart to heart connect with. What do we do with that when we're struggling to find true relationships where we can feel safe to grow and feel somewhat on the same page of moving in a direction for heart awakening and transformation? So we pray that in our discussion, you'll find some insight, some encouragement, and realize that you're not alone in this journey. A lot of people who are heart awakened are struggling to find relationships that they can really run with. So welcome to Transformed You. I'm Mark DeJesus here with my amazing wife and co-host, Melissa.
Hey, everyone.
And we're looking forward to having this discussion. So I get emails. I get feedback in coaching sessions. I get comments, interactions.
Yep.
Hey, I love this. I am all about it, but you know what? I just can't seem to find anyone to heart connect with. And what do I do about it? And so we've discovered, like, hey, we've been in those same journeys ourselves. Where do we begin in digesting this? What's a helpful thing? Maybe I can start by asking you, how did that affect your world in looking at relationships and wanting to have heart-to-heart connection? Give me an example of the struggle and what's been helpful in you moving to healthy places.
Okay. So for me, my entire life, this is something I think everybody wants. There's a very, very small part of the population, I think, that's like, yeah, I don't want a friend. I'm good. We all want relationship, right? So it's been like an interesting journey for me in what it looks like to connect to people, because I've had such deep rejection issues that I've had to overcome. So for, I would say, most of my life in relationships, I would overcompensate, overtalk, over-connect, over-try to connect.
You're trying too hard.
Trying way too hard. Oversharing, feeling completely yucky after, saying things people didn't earn the right to hear. I think I've had like an awkward journey in a lot of ways with that. Mm-hmm. Then I would connect to people, and in my desire to want to feel heart connected, it was maybe too much. It was too much for people of where I wanted to head with it, or we just weren't on the same page. And I, in a lot of ways, and I think a lot of people can connect to this, I try to force it to happen.
And then it's easy to get.
I will meet an old man we joke about this a lot. I can meet an old man in the grocery store, and if he smiles at me and talks to me, I instantly want to be like, do you want to be my grandpa? I don't have a grandpa. Like, do you want to talk? Do you want to go have lunch? Do you want to go have coffee? So I relate to this battle for a lot of people. Now, I will make a caveat, because we get this comment as well. You are so lucky you have Mark, which, yes, I am. We talk about literally everything. We feel a deep need for each other in connection, in relationship, but we still are very void when it comes to desiring and having connected relationships and having, even
still
outside
have that same
of it,
struggle.
We still do.
Sure.
We still do. So I think that, for myself, I'm still in process of what this looks like to find deeper friendships. I have it somewhat with certain people but then there's certain people like I don't get to see all the time and talk to.
Yeah.
So I think there are varying degrees of the struggle to find heart-connected relationships. And like I want to joke and just be like, I just want to get a blanket and lay on the floor because I'm just sick of it. Mm-hmm. I'm sick of trying to find it, or then being disappointed. And because of OCD things that I've struggled and about things that I obsess about, I really have a hard time when I'm not feeling connected to people. I mull over past relationships where I feel like maybe I blew it, where I came on too strong. Like, so, and I notice when I'm not filling that need in relationship that I then obsess about all my other historical relationships of friendships.
Right. That's a very common thing, that when you're in a place of transition, or just you haven't filled that place, or had a breakthrough experience yet, you're in that in-between stage searching, that it's easy to look back to the old days, sometimes in a like, oh, I wish I had that back
I wish
then.
I had them in my life now. And it's like,
And
well,
then but like the good ones, we look back at the
Right.
good connections, we go back, and then also we look back at the fallouts and start spinning in it. And a lot of times it can be a very unproductive, where
yeah.
it's like,
Well, and I
where it's
put
like,
all the blame on me.
right,
I
right.
take all the blame. It was me. I said that,
Yeah, and then it devalues, and it loses, like, it devalues who you are, and then you lose perspective on the relationships, because I know for me, I'm coming from a place where I'm down, and I'm not exactly as, like, thinking encouraging. It's more like, oh, just kind of more in a heavy state. That look back at those relationships, and then it brings you to the present. In fact, I just did a video based on Psalm 42, where David was reflecting back, oh, the times that I with joy and with happiness celebrated. Like, that can be good to know, okay, God can meet you, the same God that led you in that can lead you to the future. But it can also work against you, where you're like, I want the good old days. And really, you're probably in a new stage, in a new chapter, where
Right,
it's new
because
things.
we have a hard time recognizing seasons of relationships, and I think it's because we don't have good, fulfilling ones that fill us anyway. So when we need to move on, or it's just a situation that like you have to let go of, it's really hard to do that, and that we don't have good resolve in relationships.
Right.
So that to me is a big one. Because we don't have current present ones, whether it's with a spouse, a friend, a sister, somebody. That's where all that past stuff comes up and just is like a monster and takes you on too.
Yeah, I think one of the things that works against us is we don't have that healthy perspective about past relationships.
Yeah.
It becomes a like, well, they were so this. We feel the need to make them like they did the wrong thing and I did the right thing. That's just a dangerous place to go into, because it's not that simple. And it's not even about blaming them and blaming you. Sometimes it's just not really about blaming at all. I do believe that what you said, most of our relationships are seasonal. If you look back in your history, you have people that you stay in touch with for a long time, but they're not like super close covenant. The ones that you'll have a great connection with, many times it's for a season, and we don't know how to handle the season transition. Because you look back, if I was to sit down with people and kind of like outline some of those past relationships that they have a lot of hurt or disappointment, when you start healing through it, you realize, I don't think I'd want to be in that relationship right now. I'm in a different season of my life.
Right.
Nothing against them, nothing against me. It's just more about being okay. And I feel like if we can get to that place more in our lives, we'd stop making everyone else like the black and white
Enemy. Right.
And I believe that's maturity.
Right.
Maturity is really having a perspective of like, you know what? It was a good season. We needed to move on. It's okay. We don't need to be close friends. We don't need to be besties anymore. There was something that we sharpened each other in, and then that expired and it was time to move on. Most relationships don't realize it's time to move on. Right. So then they have like these fights, or they self-sabotage, or there becomes these toxic things that rise up. It happens a lot in churches. Many times somebody is showing the signals it's time to move on from this fellowship, move out into maybe a new venture, a new season, and we don't recognize it. It's like, no, you need to stay here for the rest of your life, and if you don't,
If you're not committed to us, then you're the devil.
There's
right?
something wrong with you. So I feel like in my journey, one of the things that's been helpful is the power of really looking at something through God's love and through his loving acceptance without, I would go to the judging, this is wrong. This is dysfunctional. I got to move on. And then it was like self-protective. And then just not having a healthy perspective where I would just beat myself up. Because then I'd be in that season where I'm like, man, I don't have like the connections I'm longing for. And like you said, I would blame myself. And one of the patterns I found myself historically falling into was when I would be in a relationship where I just wanted connection, many times it would turn into a helping scenario where it's like stuff would come up and I'd have some great feedback and great, some things that I could share that would really help in perspective. And the person would feel really great and encouraged. And then it would kind of be that kind of relationship.
It wasn't a give and take. It turned it. Yeah. Right.
So that was very frustrating for years. One time, a guy that I was sitting down with, I was sharing this frustration. And he said a statement. He said, there's a part of you that's going to have to accept that when you interact, like you bring that aspect of who you are.
Right.
And you're going to have to accept that. And he made me think. It made me think. And the power of acceptance, I think, is really important. Of like, okay, this is where my relationship grid is. It's not about blaming them, blaming me. It's more like this is where it's at. Being aware of when I'm in group settings, typically that can rise up in me of where I give help or I give encouragement or I lead. I'm so used to leading groups and leading situations. I want to lay back and just let it happen, but it's like, okay, it just kind of comes out. Right. And part of the journey is really just accepting those factors versus always fighting it, judging it. Maybe you're in a situation where you're like, I always initiate in relationships. Okay, maybe you're just a great initiator.
Right.
Maybe you just have you're like, well, I always have people over my house. Maybe you're just really great at hospitality and other people don't have that leaning as much as you.
I don't like that word.
What word?
Hospitality.
Yes, that's the
no,
word,
I know it is a word, but I feel like that's a label that gets put on people. Like your gift is hospitality. It has a bad.
Right.
Oh God, sorry. I didn't mean to take a.
No, that's funny because it reminds me of when I first met you. You had just taken a spiritual gifts test, and it's interesting because God's used you in a lot of great ways. But your spiritual test was like you're good at hospitality, and you could serve tables.
Yeah.
And help set up things, set up events.
Right.
When
I'm glad I didn't get pigeonholed into that.
Well, when we got together, I was like, I see way more than that. Not that that's bad.
Right, because there's amazing.
That's needed, and I think all of us need to carry some of that.
But really, deep down, we're taking a side tangent here. That gift, there's a nurturing gift inside of there, and if we would dive deeper into that gift, people would really, I don't know. Anyways. We'll talk about mother things and nurture another time. But anyway, I wanted to say something about what the tangent you were on because I mean to point the pen at you.
Point away.
On, really like looking at maybe patterns that you might have in when we are in relationships. Like, okay, you know what? You lead and accepting those things, right? But there is a part too, as you were talking of where maybe you do dysfunctional patterns. And I kind of want to segue into what that looks like as far as accepting the gifts you have, but even if it comes out yucky, still staying in the game to find friendships, even when it goes bad.
Right.
Did I segue that good? Because that's what I was thinking about as you were talking, because yes, there's a great part of acceptance and, yes, this is what you bring to the table as a person and blah, 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 blah. But when it doesn't go good, not completely stopping that either and staying in the game. And it's like, what is that fine line between?
Yeah, well, there's two thoughts
I mean?
that come to mind. One of them is that I very easily could feed that helper thing where I'm now a machine of just helping people and I'll lose my identity, my worth, my value. It gets wrapped up in that. And many people can get wrapped up in it. I'm always the helper, so then they're always the helper. And then when you try to love them, they're like, oh, no, don't worry about me. You ever hear that? I'm sure
Yeah,
you
we
hear that
met a
in
lot of
people.
those
Don't worry
people.
about me. And then like you said, then in other extremes, you get hurt and you just want to turn that thing off
Yeah,
and
because I
just
don't like the
forget.
way it feels.
I'm not even gonna try, connecting in relationships. I felt like the balance was accepting that factor is in play. That if a lot of times if I'm a part of a group, they're like, it eventually can come out, hey, do you want to lead this? Because no one wants to lead. And it's like, I've got a number of areas. I recognize that factor's there, but I don't know. For me, it's like refining who I am, like learning who I am. That's not who I am.
Mm-hmm.
It's a factor that's involved in what I'm gifted in and what happens, but allowing to discover who I am. So there would be seasons where I would just back away and just take a break. Like I'm not going to do that helper thing all the time. And I'm going to take a kind of a break. There's been times we've taken sabbaticals. In fact, we're going to take one soon here where I just took a break to just realign. And it was during those times where I began to like discover who I am apart from those things. That was helpful for me.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Or
It does, because you have to start there, because we want to bring the healthiest self into relation, right? So we're desiring that from others, but yet we're not really working on that in ourselves.
Yeah.
We want to feel safe. And this is the conundrum, right?
Right.
I want to feel safe with people in my yucky to be like, yeah, I had a bad day, and them still love me. But I still need to love myself too,
Right.
when it doesn't come out right. And then, okay, well, I'll go back at it tomorrow. It's like the ultimate in safety. What does that look like when you're trying to interact? And really, ultimately, it just goes back to starting with yourself, between yourself and God. And when you can kind of wrestle that through, and then I think we can do a better job as we're interacting with others to find those relationships that are truly heart connected. So it does start with ourself. But
It does.
we're interacting with people all the time. It's like
Yeah. And I found what I did was
it sounds beautiful when I say it, right? Let's get right with God and ourselves first. Then as we're interacting with others, but you're in relationship all the time, whether it's the person at the deli, at the grocery store, the old man I meet at the grocery store, or your like, that is the problem that we have as human beings. We're constantly in working it out.
Yeah. And I found, I'm trying to think through the most difficult times relationally for me where loneliness would creep in. Loneliness is a major, major factor. And it would often come about during seasons of transition. And we've had a number of them. I left a church that I was working at for a good 12, 13 years. I grew up in. We had pastored a church ourselves that we had moved on from. And in throughout that, there were major transitions. And we moved from, New England down to, to North Carolina.
Hallelujah.
There's all these transitions where I'd feel just a sense of loneliness, profound emptiness,
So
just like,
true.
and what I learned was to not judge it, to not try to create like a diagnosis on it. It's just like, God, I just feel empty, and I just bring it to you right now. I just bring this to you, and I lean into it versus medicating it or just busying it away. God, here it is. And it caused me to learn how to become a better friend to myself, because I realized, wow, and it's what birthed the book, God Loves Me and I Love Myself, was this thought that I felt God was speaking to me. It was an interesting thought. I'm crying out to him for answers, doing spiritual calisthenics, fasting, praying, all these things. We're just struggling to see breakthrough in the growth we were currently at the time calling for. And this thought came back, and it just literally quieted everything inside of me and made me go, whoa. It was this. When times get really tough, you get really hard on yourself. And it was like, this is the time for you to face yourself and finally start seeing yourself the way that I see you. And it birthed a whole new perspective of our family, my personal life, our ministry work. A whole new facet began to open up, because I realized I have this problem and everybody has this problem. We're in emptiness, And really the truth is, now man was not meant to be alone, but really we don't do well being by ourselves
Right.
to any extent. So it's like when we leave a fellowship, we're used to having the people around, and it's like the loneliness creeps in, and then we're rushing into the next one.
Correct. Most people do.
So
Right.
I learned this even when we were pastoring. People would leave another church and they would go, "Oh, we're going to come to your church." And I would say to them, take some time off. Don't come here. don't come here yet. That I don't hear like pastors saying that. They're like, "Oh yes, another person,
You're
another
saying
person
what we
help
want to
us.
hear, right?
Another person, you can feed their neediness and feed those broken areas." Like, no, take some time to just figure out who you are individually, who you are as a family. I was a pastor of a church, and I was telling people not to come to the church. It wasn't like a command, like, I'm going to block you if you don't come. Some of them didn't listen, and they started attending anyways. And the issues came up, and
right, because that's the one thing we talked about a lot is you will carry the pain from your past fellowship. Right. And at some point, we will disappoint you because we're not perfect.
Right.
I'm going to make a grand statement. Pastor.
So let me disappoint you right away.
Right.
Let's do this right now. Get it out of the way. And I think that's maybe some of the reason why Jesus would say like his strongest statements at the beginning of the relationship, like sell everything you had, let the dead bury the dead. He's like, let's get past this offense thing so that then we can have a real relationship. But anyway, I found that I think our perspective on relationships is off. We feel like we should have this amazing circle of deep, close relationships. We should have, 3 great friends and like 10 friends outside of that, and then amazing groups where we just flow beautifully and go deep all the time.
Can I say this too, though? And this image is coming in my head as you're saying that. Movies and church Instagram does not help because, like, growing up, the movie that I wanted to emulate, it's because it's my personality too. I wanted to be like the women were in Steel Magnolias. They could be downright insane, crazy, act crazy, but still completely love each other. I still want that. I want a friend that goes, knock it off. And I still love them, right? I think every woman then wants the friends that we see, these perfect devotionals where these church leaderships are getting together in a log cabin and they all have like the most amazing throws on themselves, beautiful pashminas with their perfect devotional books.
You're about to go into your
pens.
Valley Girl voice, like amazing throws.
We all, and you think they're all like super deep heart connected because they're telling you that they are. They're not. Trust me. But who doesn't want that?
Right.
Even though I know real life, I've seen behind the curtain, behind church leadership. I've seen behind. It's never like that. I still want it.
Yeah, it's not as pretty as it's presented.
No, I still do.
So then we're in a disempowered expectation. We're in a disempowered state, and then we go through our feed. And it's like, and you're just being hit in your social media or whatever you're looking at.
To have that,
where you're being hit with not quite accurate representations, and your system's being hit with this. Now you're further going down in discouragement, and so then you walk around going, I don't have things. Then it causes you not to treasure what you do have. So maybe you have that one friend that you can call and you can talk to about, you're on the same page about maybe certain topics, right? But you can't talk about everything.
Right. You're not going to sit and do a Bible study with them maybe, but you can talk about this one thing.
Right. You maybe can't do a Bible study because every time you do that, they go theologically into like weird tangents and it doesn't go fruitful. Or maybe you go into politics and it's like, oh my goodness, it just doesn't go anywhere. Right. A helpful pathway is realizing I'm grateful that I can sit down and I can have this. And maybe it's you go to a group and you watch a sports game or you knit or you know, whatever.
Right.
And it's like that still brings a relational value, even though it doesn't go as deep as you like. And
Okay.
and I think it's a rarity. If you have somebody that you like have all these interests in common, all same page and everything, that's a rarity. And it's a blessing, but it's a rarity.
It is.
So
So
go
I
ahead.
want to say this and be, I don't, it's not like a Debbie Downer, but so I hear what you're saying, and we talk about this a lot. Like if you have a friend that you can do nothing but cooking with, I'm just using it as an example, and you land in that, that's awesome. But at some point, don't you hit a wall where it's like relationships are meant to grow?
Good question.
They're meant to grow, and you hit a point where you're like, I want more. I want to be heart connected. And you hit a disappointment. And it's dealing in those things.
I think you hit a disappointment because
Right? Do you hear
because
what I'm saying?
yeah, it's a great question.
Your
But I think
natural relationship is meant to grow.
I think the disappointment, not all the time, but I think the disappointment can come about the expectation that I place on it. So if I have a certain expectation that I have, and we don't have that together, but I have it in my mind. This is what I did all the time in relationship. I have this picture of what I wanted it to be. Well, we didn't have that agreement, and it wasn't like we were both really moving towards it.
Right.
It was more like, I can do this. I can talk about
Don't you feel like
this.
that happens a lot in marriage? It's like, wait. We started off, this is what we thought it was going to be. And then all of a sudden, one of the person's like, yeah, I'm changing the rules because I want it to be this now. And the other person's like, whoa, no, that's not
Right.
what I signed up for.
Yeah.
I think that happens a lot in marriage.
Well, I think marriage is a different category because
that.
marriage is the highest covenant level.
True.
So we can get to that in a minute because many
let's do
people write
that.
to me, my husband or my wife.
Yeah.
You know, I can't find the heart connection. Let's make that a part of the
Okay.
discussion. From a practical standpoint, I think when you find yourself in areas where you can't heart connect, you have to focus on expectation. Where's my expectation too intense that I need to just maybe chill out a little bit and put things in perspective? And I think, what can I work on? Because I can look at my life in my early 20s. I do not see my life pattern as being a good friend. I was great
I wasn't either.
I was
so selfish.
I was great at connecting with people who were working together with me on the same mission. But if you weren't in that, I really didn't have time for you. Like, it was like I ignored a lot of phone calls. I didn't get back to people because I was busy. We put on the facade of busy. And it's really just it's lazy. When you're over busy relationally, you're late. It's emotionally lazy. It just
So
is.
true.
We don't like to hear that. It takes more discipline to stay in touch. It takes more effort and work to go, you know what? I'm going to chill out from all this stuff I'm swamping my life with. I'm going to make some room to talk with some people. That takes more work. So when I realized, okay, I've got major mental health battles, and God began to do what I called, my personal renovation, one of the things that popped up was slowing down and making time for relationship. Like, wow, this has got to change forever. Like, I want to be able to have moments where I'm sitting down and I'm having just a quality interaction. We're blessing each other. I want to be open to that. And that helped me a lot because it changed my personality, it changed my perspective, how I approach things. It changed my whole value system, right? And that goes back to the top of this whole series when we were first talking about heart connectedness and value, is that I had to make a value for relationships to be emotionally healthy, because that's where you work it out. And during the tougher times of emptiness, those are good times to, in a loving way, not condemning, just kind of work on yourself. Like,
Yeah.
what's the filter I carry? Is there a pattern I have that might be a little annoying? Is there a relational approach that needs adjustment? Do I go quick to fixing people? Am I not a good listener? I personally feel You could certainly give your perspective. I feel people are terrible listeners. I feel like this is probably the biggest thing that we need to work on. We're very good at like, this is how I feel, and this is what I think you should do, or this is what I think, this is my opinion. And we listen to people preparing our next statement. You know, have you ever been in a conversation where you're just listening and there's no prepared response? You're just taking it in. I find this is a trait that is really lacking.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something that I've, even in marriage, like I didn't feel like I was a great listener, even though I thought I was. Like, no, I got to work on this some more. And so I think, you know, what are some other areas that you can go, okay, somebody that's wanting heart-connected relationship, it's not there. It's kind of, all right, let's focus on working on ourselves in a non-condemning way. Don't beat yourself up.
Yeah.
What are some areas that you think are helpful in that regard?
Honestly, dealing with rejection. I feel like that's when we're even talking about this, I think that aspect in everyone's life needs to be reckoned with.
Right. It sits at the root system.
It
of
really
all our
does,
problems, yeah.
because it's the lens in which we see everything. And it's hard to even evaluate relationships when you have that lens. Don't you think?
Totally.
I don't
totally.
know.
And I think I want to mention the book too, because we call it a mindset.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just, we talk about rejection in a way where it's not something that happens to you so much. People say, well, I've never been rejected, or well, first of all, that's not even accurate. We've all experienced some form of it. But it's a mindset that you begin to carry out of relational gaps in your life. Maybe you struggle in relationship with God, or you struggle in your relationship with others. And in that dysfunction, or in that emptiness, or in that area of pain, certain patterns kick up. Most of us become very performance driven, but a lot of us have a lot of relationship entanglements that get really messed up. I think the communication filter is a big one. What's your filter when people talk to you? Because rejection, it trains our filter. So for example, no one listens to me, right? So when you go into a relationship setting, you look for that. And it might be somebody they just turn their head for a moment, but you magnify that and you look at it and you highlight it. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing that we have to understand as a world relationally. If you have something as a perspective that you put on your world, you will look for it. And what you look for, you will find. Mm-hmm. So if you think the world is against you, you will find it everywhere you turn. Yeah. You will filter out whatever you're reading, hearing, looking at to find, even if it's a small molecule of what you're saying, boom, there it is. You'll focus in on it, and you can't see context, right? So we do this all the time, and then we move into the next relationship, and we are still carrying that filter. And as soon as they trigger that place, our dukes come up. And maybe the person's not a safe person, but we can't see things accurately because the rejection filter has tainted it. And then we carry a story. I'm always encouraging people, what's the story you carry over your relationships? What's the narrative that's there? So if you look at your relationship patterns and go, right? We come up with a story. The story comes out of like that filter that we have. And then the story, we become married to it, right?
We don't even realize that we have to.
Right,
we
right.
Don't. Yeah.
I had to be careful that I don't become married to a victim story, right? Mm-hmm. It'd go like this. So for example, I always go in a situation and I always end up helping. Now, I'm not talking about like just leading small groups. I would go to people for mentoring and end up having to help that person, right? So it's a big pattern. Yeah. And that day where that guy said to me, hey, it's just something, you just got to accept that that's what happens. And now what? And it was like, okay. And I realized I was carrying a story. And there comes times where God will use certain interactions where people will interrupt our story. And maybe, I remember another time that comes to mind. I was sitting down at lunch with a guy, And I was sharing with him what I felt God was doing in my life. And he said, yeah, I remember you telling me the same thing last time we met. Well, the last time we met was like a year ago. And I realized in my perspective, oh, it was good for that season, but now it's got me stuck.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm kind of saying the same thing over and over again. And it's a protective mechanism, and I'm under a victim mindset, meaning that it's limiting me now. I need to open up for new things and new approaches,
right?
Or else I'm going to stay stuck in this season. So the rejection mindset is super important, because here isn't this the thing that God's doing? He uses our relationship experiences as places to mature us.
Absolutely.
So maybe you had just an abusive church, or maybe you grew up in an abusive home, or maybe you had people like legit just betray you, and the enemy uses that to just shred you, and take you out. God looks at this whole thing and he goes, I'm so big and so powerful that I'm going to actually use these places of greatest pain. I'm going to turn the tables on the enemy. But you need to just hear my invitation just to heal, mature. Just let me work on these areas. Don't rush to fix it. Don't rush to try to, get everybody on your side. And those people are so bad, and let me tell you the story why. That never helps.
And I'm changed. I'm a different person now.
Right.
You don't need to declare it.
Right.
You don't need to let the fruit of what you've worked on reveal itself.
I didn't just say it, I declared it. Right. So anyways, it's a side joke. If you didn't get that, don't worry about
Really good joke.
So I think that let's go to marriage. Because a lot of people say,
it's a doozy.
A lot of people say, I'm married to somebody who I'm not heart connected with. I can't run with. I can't, go the distance with.
Yeah.
Where do we begin with that?
Oh boy.
So
Well. Okay. I think it goes back to just the same things that we're talking about. And listen, marriage is, like we said, it's the highest level. It's covenant. It's everything.
Yeah.
It's your practice run before you're in heaven. Like, it's everything of being the bride. It's everything. And it's where a lot of our deepest pain is, because the person that you share a home, a bed, a life, kids, the whole 9 yards is you're meant to be interconnected and entwined with that person, heart-wise and everything. And sadly, I will make this very real statement. Mark and I work very hard at our marriage. We're not perfect, but we continue to work hard. We've met with a lot of people who have struggles in marriage, and we are deeply, deeply saddened at the state of marriages, at the level where women have had to take the reins. Typically, men are passive and don't really want or have the desire to do the work unless it's threatened. So I want to make that statement up front, that just by working on rejection and, you know what, it is hard work. And we don't take this topic lightly at all.
And it's difficult to, in a show like this, process
sum it up,
all the factors, because people will, in comment sections or in emails, yeah, but what about, it's like, oh, sure, yes, of course, it's you can't cover every aspect and every avenue. We just oh, sorry about that, bumped the mic. We just like to cover the perspectives that we find are very helpful, that a lot of times people aren't aware of.
And God can do amazing things and work with you when you make decisions to love, to grow, to heal. There are amazing things he can do. He can restore a marriage, and he can also say it's time to move on if there's been biblical, things. Sure. Okay. So, we don't want to sit here and say, but if you read through the rejection book and you love yourself, then voila, your marriage relationship's going to be amazing. But there are things that you can do to improve what you have going on. Right?
Yeah. And I think the tips that we gave in the beginning apply to this as well.
Yes.
The power of acceptance. Okay, so
good,
for example, you're a wife and you're like, man, I'm reading all these books, and and my husband
seeing what's right.
My husband is not interested in it. It's like, okay, you're angry because you have a picture of what you want your husband to be, and it keeps your expectation keeps you from being able to recognize what's really going on.
Yeah.
It also steals your gratitude because you're focused on what you don't have versus what you do have. But sometimes you need to really come to that place of going, okay, this is where we're at. We're roommates, or I want to talk about spiritual things. He doesn't want to at all. Now, this is an approach that I take, and you can totally disagree with it, and that's fine. But I've gone through enough dark scenarios, really dark scenarios, with people and couples that I feel this is important. I bring them to a point of decision, like in marriage. Okay, either you're all in or get a divorce.
Right.
And most people don't like that statement. They don't like that because they want you to come up with a mysterious third option. The third option is roommate syndrome, which I use biblical precedent in where Jesus said, I wish you were either hot or cold, or I spit you right in my mouth. You're lukewarm. Make a decision. And Jesus is talking to his bride. And everything in marriage is to reflect our relationship with Christ. That's what Paul said. He went back and forth between the two. So the point of this podcast is not marriage, but this is a good area to recognize, okay, this is where it's at. And it's like, you have to come to a point of decision. Are we going to be all in to try to work? Now, all in is probably not going to be you being all in to change your husband to be this whatever you think he needs to be. It's also being realistic about agreements together. Like, where can we go to improve our marriage? Because we got to stop this just phony facade that we have on. Just for the sake of people thinking we have a great marriage, when really we don't.
And the kids it's worse for the kids anyway.
Yeah, and when I find relationally, people can often not be grateful for what they do have, and they focus more on what they don't have versus feeding what's there. So, for example, are there ways that you can learn to love your husband in ways that you haven't? Do you show interest in the things that he shows interest in? So if it's reversed and you're like, a guy who's going, I'm not on the same page with my wife, or she nags me too much, or she's this, or she's toxic. Okay, either you're in or you're out. Are you in or are you out? Which is it? Because stop with the middle thing, because the middle ground just allows you to just react and just passively sail through to whatever's happening. So therefore you have no momentum.
Right.
You have to make a decision. And Jesus is always calling us to the power of decision. She asked the husband, in what way can you sacrificially love your wife in a new way? Yeah, but she doesn't listen to me. Okay, I accept that. She doesn't give you such and such whatever. You can't control that. What are you going to do
right
to grow in what love means? Well, I'm tired of it. So then it brings me back to, okay, so then why don't you just step out and move on? No, because God doesn't want me to divorce. Okay, so stop playing the games, right? So this is, we play a lot of games because we don't want to take responsibility and then just do the hard work. So like if you're in a season where you're lonely, it's hard work to wake up every day and go, all right, I got to encourage myself today. I got to work on myself so I'm still open, right? So it's finding the empowerment in where you are. And sometimes it just starts with finding that once to change your filter to look for the one speck of good. So I turned seasons of loneliness into, you know what? I'm going to learn to be Mark's best friend. And I think that you and I have gone through round after round after round of talking out the agreement of how are we moving together in this, right? We talk about how we were first married. We were like, if we didn't have any tools, well, that wasn't going to last.
Not very long.
You kidding me? Like two hard-headed
tools, but we sought the tools.
Yeah.
We put the hard work in. And I think at the end of the day, that is the choice. And, to go back to, it's all about decision. There's a decision, like you're saying, to wake up in the morning and go, okay, I'm awake today. I'm grateful for that. Carrying that. And wow, a surprise can happen where you connect to someone and then that carries you a little bit more. It's all about decision. I love when you talk about that because it's so true.
Yeah, because I don't have control over a lot, but I
Right.
have control over my ability to decide where am I going to point my compass, right? So I'll give another example. There was a season of transition where I was really struggling with loneliness and then the pain of the transition. And I find God will use, if you're open, God will use unique circumstances. And there was a guy who ran our son's autism support group that Max would go to each week. And I just found we just had great conversations when I'd see him, slowly over time. Now, this guy, and if he watches this episode, he'll nod. We come from two totally different, matrices of beliefs. We don't see things the same, as far as faith. He's not a follower of Christ. We're total opposites in politics. And we have coffee and we have great back and forth of understanding each other. We have a great deal of respect for each other.
Yeah.
And he was a great source of encouragement in my life. Where during some really difficult, dark times, we still stay in touch, even though I don't live in Connecticut anymore. And he was a source of encouragement. And I would say that he'd probably say the same thing too. And I know he even tunes into some of our episodes. And he's not someone that's in a church or he's not a Christ follower.
He's a great guy.
And God used him.
Right.
Now, if I had this expectation of, I need this, it's like God works with us where we're at. You may find a beautiful connection with someone that you go to a nursery to get flowers and you have a nice conversation with somebody. I like to encourage people, start with that and thank God for that. Now, that person at the nursery you have a great conversations with is not going to be your mentor and help you in every area of your life. But it gives you a place where you can just relationally flow in an area. And when I open myself to that, I find value now in any conversation I have. My neighbor stops by and I'm in the middle of we're doing all this work on our yard and stuff like that. And I'm, digging away, I'm sweating. Neighbor comes over. I drop my shovel. We talk for half an hour.
Right. Which you wouldn't have done
historically.
No way. He would have known, all right, Mark doesn't want to talk and move on.
I would have been irritated that you even came by to even try to talk. Can't you see I'm busy, right? That intense, type A kind of thing. And no, now I have value for that. And so, like you said, you're in CVS or Walmart or wherever, and you pass by a person and you have a little interaction.
Typically old people. I just love older people. It's my deep need to want to have I didn't have good grandparents, not in the slightest, so that's my heart need.
You had a lady in Target pray for you, didn't you?
That was amazing.
Did you share that on the podcast?
I don't think so. We had just moved here, just bought this house, and I had this picture of moving down south that I wanted the wraparound porch, big brick home. I had and there was just things that didn't line up. And, we were living with my mother. We needed to move out of there and find our home and get settled. And we found this home. And it was just closing day. And I was just going through, I was excited about the house, but you go through what you wish you were having.
Sure.
You go through all these emotions. And closing day was the most rainy, cold in November, late November, 2 years ago. Cold day. It just wasn't the perfect day to close on your house. Then with the laws down here of when you can get the key and we had to wait hours, it was weird. Anyways, I was sad and I didn't really know what was wrong with me. Now, in hindsight, I can look back, right? But I didn't know I was kind of carrying. And you should think, it's the happiest day of our life and we are stressed out. And so you were going to get some stuff done because it was go mode. And I knew we bought a fixer-upper.
Mm-hmm.
and we had a lot of work to do. And literally after closing, you were Home Depot.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, okay, I'm just going to go to Target, get a couple things, and wait till we can get the key. And I go to Target, and I get in the checkout, and this older woman is singing Bible hymns, right? She's just singing. That is the awesome part about living in the South, right? You cannot do that in Connecticut, and people think you are a fruitcake. But anyways, I'm now instantly grateful for living in North Carolina, because there's something you can understand about people who live in maybe a more blue democratic state where if you're a Christian, it's kind of like you find your little community. In the South, it's more you're a Christian and that's just it. So there is a freedom to your faith in the South that is just of high value that we appreciate. I still to this day appreciate it. So that is instantly I access gratitude, but I'm still struggling. Like, oh, this lady, she's great. Well, I get up to the checkout, and she just like looks right at me and basically starts prophesying to me. It was beyond beautiful in how but then she kind of like personally connected to me with her own story and when she moved here. And then as I was grabbing my bags to leave, she made a couple statements to me about family and something that I was struggling with that was so dead on. It was so powerful. And to this day, it's been almost 2 years, a year and a half. It still is with me in a day that I thought, despair, even though we had signed on that. You know what I'm saying, everybody.
Sure.
Where God met me in it. Completely unexpected.
Right.
And those are the things that we have to be open to. I still think back on that day because it was so powerful.
Right.
What God gave me that day.
So it's like to the best that you're able, being somewhat open. Because if you weren't open, you should be like, lady, stop your singing and let's just check out.
Right.
I got things to do. I had a closing today.
Right. I need to get to the house. We have to go. We're in go mode now.
Yeah. So I think that's.
And I cried a really good, like, hearty cry that I needed to cry that day.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I find most people to some degree are in that. You're in a frustration. You're in a relational thing, and in that there's jewels where God will meet you, and it may not be in the box that you want it or the kind of perfect. In that scenario, you're processing, hey, this is what I expected when we moved. Okay, it's not going to maybe be like that this time around, maybe next time around.
Correct.
But I got to just process through where we're at right now in our journey, and then God uses. And
it was a miracle that we were here anyway.
Right.
Total miracle.
A miracle that we were able to even settle in.
Crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
And in that moment with her, I was able to take all that in where I wasn't before. So anyway.
So I hope that in our conversation you find your journey, find where you're at. And I pray that, our discussion would be an encouragement for you to kind of take a deep breath and to process with God's love in your life, his acceptance, his patience, his kindness, the power of his belief in your journey, that he's working. He hasn't left you. He's not left you hanging. And you may be in a season of loneliness. And I pray that these seasons where you feel empty and lonely would be a precious time for you to connect to God's nurture and his comfort for you right now. And if the resources we're talking about have been a blessing to your life, please go to markdejesus.com and consider a one-time donation or become a regular subscriber. Jump into the heart healing journey. In fact, now we have volume 1 of the online course available. It's amazing. There's so much content in there. You can also go to my YouTube channel and find even more stuff there. And what we want to do in the next episode or two, we're coming now towards the close of this season. Send us your questions that have to do with the subject of shepherding your heart, shepherding the life of your heart, how that affects you personally and even relationally. And we're going to do some Q&As in the next episode. So send us that. We'll let you know more about it. But we look forward to bringing you great resources and great content from our hearts to yours so you can experience healing, freedom, and transformation that God designed for you to have. Many blessings to you, and we look forward to seeing you all next time.
Thank you, everyone.